Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Apollas Odyssey. I'm your host, Apolla Asteria, and I am excited to be back in the studio for another Wednesday live show. So I know I've had some technical issues lately since moving into my place. It's been kind of weird setting up with the lighting and everything, but I think I got it all down, and hopefully plan to have regular interviews every Wednesday from now on. So that's going to be really exciting. So yeah, make sure you hit the notification bell if you haven't already, so you know when I'm doing all my live shows. Because, I have a lot planned. I plan to basically set up interviews every week from now on because I plan on really staying in town as long as I can. I know I've been doing a lot of travels and I haven't been able to keep up on my Wednesday shows. So, but I'm planning on kind of staying around a little more so that I can actually be more present with that. And basically, I have a lot of people that I've been wanting to interview for a long time, a lot of people that have asked me to interview them. I've just been kind of waiting till I'm a little more stable to do that. So I'm excited to be able to do more of that now. And I plan on, usually every Wednesday, sometimes I may do another day that isn't a Wednesday. So make sure you hit the notification bell just so that you know when I am going to be coming out with a new show. So tonight's show, I'm going to be talking about ancient alien sites around the world. Because that is actually a really like a favorite topic of mine. It's something that I've been interested in my whole life, really. I actually grew up an hour out away from the Ancient Aliens publishing house, where who is it? David Childress actually publishes all the books of like everyone in the ufology scene. And it's just been something that's been really interesting for me for many years, all these ancient sites around the world. That's really how I got into what I do, is by, from a young kid studying all these, ancient sites, all these ancient civilizations. And I always felt like there was something to these advanced ancient civilizations around the world that wasn't written in our history books and that we aren't being told. And, there's obviously stories in every ancient culture around the world about gods coming to Earth and giving humans technology or, sometimes farming, different kinds of ideas on basically how to have civilization. And it's really fascinating to me. So I always felt that these ancient gods that were coming to Earth might not have necessarily been like religious like gods and goddesses, but actual extraterrestrial beings that were coming to the planet in ancient times and maybe still to this day. So I really always felt that there was something to that, and I have spent a lot of time myself traveling these and exploring these ancient sacred sites around the world. It's kind of a favorite pastime of mine. So obviously when we get into this, the first thing that people usually want to talk about is the pyramids. I'm not really going to talk about the pyramids as much in tonight's show because I feel that that's something that has been talked about. And I want to talk about some sites that people may not be as much aware of. And like I said, I've been to a lot of these sites around the world. Some of them, I've been to Egypt, I've been to Peru. I recently did an adventure in Crete, which was interesting. Very interesting place. Thailand, I've been to a lot of the ancient sites there, and I'm excited to explore more in the future. Also, something that I haven't really got into in tonight's show that I don't really plan to get into is, I feel that there's a lot to be uncovered in America that has not been uncovered because, according to my research, I feel that America was actually hit the hardest by the ancient cataclysm which caused the flood in ancient times, or 11,500 years ago or so. So I feel that a lot of, maybe ancient sites in America are covered up by layers and layers of sediment, and it's going to take us a while to uncover these sites. One site in particular that a lot of people talk about is actually near where I'm from in Illinois. I grew up in Illinois, and actually 6 hours south of where I grew up, there is a pyramid that is the base of it is bigger than the base of the Pyramid of Giza, and it's kind of more of a step pyramid, but it's actually grown over with grass and everything now. But and it's like no one ever tried to uncover it. I'm like, how come? I don't know who's in charge of this site or what, but I don't understand why no one's actually gone in and dug it up. I know they try to say like, oh, it's an ancient like Native American site, and maybe it is, maybe there's something more to it. Maybe the Native Americans built over something that was there even longer, a much longer time, or that was there even previously before they got there, so these are things to look at. I think America, like I said, I really feel that it was hit the hardest by the ancient cataclysm. And I think that, maybe things were blown apart, maybe things were just covered with layers of sediment, but there's a lot here I feel that would be interesting to uncover. So, before I get started here, I want to share with you all my uniquely handcrafted energy channeling devices, Shaman Spears, which are all up on my website, shamanspears.com. I'm actually working on a new collection right now, and hopefully that'll be done soon. But I have some left from my last two collections, and some of these I actually took to Burning Man recently. I had a lot of fun with them there with that, and with my next collection, I'm really excited to rework them a little bit. I kind of realized some things while I was at Burning Man with them because I actually originally created them in a way for bringing them to like events like Burning Man, even though they have much more purpose in regards to the technology than that. That's kind of the original reason I started making them. And I never was able to actually make it there myself until this last year. And I realized some things like, I think I need straps for the bigger ones, things like that. So I'm really excited for the next collection. And I look forward to trying out some new things with that. I also have some other art pieces up on here, including my organite daggers. The organite is all, obviously used for turning all negative energy around it and ionizing it into positive energy. So definitely check those out. And I have a lot more I'll be putting up later this week on here. So definitely look out for that. But if you'd like to support me and support my show, please check out my site. I do next day shipping on all orders. So definitely check it out. And again, that's at shamanspears.com. So, and here's another example right here. I always like to keep a spear with me while I'm doing my show. I mean, basically, I carry them all over the world with me everywhere I go. Where it's like, I mean, I guess it's not really normal to carry a spear around, but I definitely like to carry them around as much as I can. And, they're filled with copper coils, crystals, magnets, and sand I collect from sacred places around the world down the inside. So they aren't just art, they're technology, and they're for the purpose of amplifying energy. and they definitely do that. So, I usually actually when I travel, I will bring some smaller ones. Even when I go to other countries, I'll take smaller ones with me and wrap them up in clothes and put them in my suitcase. And that always works out. I was actually able to do some shoots in Crete recently with them, and that was a lot of fun. Um, I also here's the Organite daggers. I have a few left that have moonstone in them and selenite and other Organite materials, so definitely check those out. All right, so I'm just looking at the comments here, and Alexander here says Graham Hancock, great author to read on ancient America. I totally agree with you. Graham Hancock is actually someone who really influenced me in my research and what I do, and my interest in coming into the UFO, ancient civilization kind of scene. And he actually really influenced me a lot in regards to what I was just talking about when it comes to the ancient cataclysm that hit the world around 11,500 years ago. I really love his work on that. My favorite book would be Magicians of the Gods by him. And I highly recommend that book if you want to understand what happened with the Great Flood and how it impacted all these places around the world, and all the evidence of the impact is really fascinating, and I highly recommend it. I'm going to talk about a lot of different books in tonight's show. I actually forgot to bring them over here. I was going to hold them up during the show, but totally forgot. But that's okay because I have them all memorized. So, but definitely recommend Graham Hancock and his work. Something that has always really inspired me. I'm also going to talk about Michael Tellinger in tonight's show. Graham Hancock and Michael Tellinger are both people who I saw going to Contact in the Desert, which is obviously the Woodstock of UFO conferences. And I started going there about 7 years ago. I think it started a little before that. Actually, probably 8, 9 years ago now. I learned a lot from those two authors by going there. And it's funny, I actually read their books for years before going to Contact in the Desert and seeing them in person. I didn't even realize who they were until I started hearing them speak. And I'm like, I read a book about this one time. And then I realized, like, oh, this is actually the author of this book. So pretty cool stuff. And Michael Tellinger, I guess basically to segue into my first one here, I'll get into him. But so like I said with tonight's show, I don't really want to talk about the obvious ones like the pyramids, places like that, because those have been talked about. I want to talk about the ones that people might not have heard as much about. And I'm going to get into like maybe 5 or 6 places today. But I plan on doing future shows on this because they're all a lot to talk about. But if you have any sites in mind that you feel are connected in some way to ancient aliens or built by ancient aliens, make sure you put it in the comments and I might pull it up and talk about it. All right, so the first one that I wanted to get into is, 1 second here. So the first one I want to get into is the ancient Anunnaki gold mines in South Africa. And this is something that, like I said, Michael Tellinger really turned me on to. And I definitely recommend checking out his work and check out his presentations. His presentations are really incredible. And it was fascinating to me seeing him one year, I think it was around 7 or 8 years ago. And he had like a certain amount of information, and then he'd done more research and found out more since then. And he's been down there just doing so much work in South Africa uncovering these gold mines. And before I read this article, I just want to say that basically what he's found, and here's some images of it here that you can see here, but basically what he has found is that there are I believe, hundreds of thousands of ancient gold mines that he uncovered in South Africa. Some of them he claims to be 200,000 years old. So, what would ancient early humans be doing mining gold? Obviously, this brings us to the Anunnaki story, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of with Zachariah Sitchin's work. And, this to me is like very much proof of it, besides, the ancient Sumerians and all their tablets talking about basically these ancient gods coming here in ancient times and mining the planet for gold and then basically splicing their DNA with ours to create this or with early hominids to create this worker race. Which, by the way, I want to say a disclaimer that I feel that there have been ancient aliens coming to the planet before that and after that. I feel that the human race has been seeded by many different ET races, and I think that's why there's so many different variations of us. So this is an example of some of these ancient gold mines. And let me just read this article here. It doesn't really go, I couldn't really find any articles that went as deep into this topic as I would have liked. Um, like I said, just check out Michael Tellinger, his work, his books, his presentations. If you want to hear more and hear his actual research and facts on it, or, all the evidence that he's found himself, I highly recommend that. It's interesting. A lot of these places, before in preparation for the show, I wanted to pull up different articles as reference points because, obviously, I can talk a lot about all this stuff. I can talk about this stuff all day, but, it was, I wanted to find some like reference points and different articles that I could bring up. And, it's really weird, but Google does not really have many information of this on the articles that come right up when you try to research them or find them online, which is interesting because there's so many books on all these topics out there, but if you try to Google it, it doesn't even come up. Like, I looked through several pages trying to find some of this evidence and research, and that just goes to show that they don't want you to know. They don't want you to know these things. They don't. So I will basically read whatever articles I can find on these different topics for today, these different places, but I will make sure that I give you the information on the books that I got most of my information from. All right, so this article by How and Why talks about 200,000-year-old ancient city found in Africa. Is it Anunnaki structures before the flood? There are millions of people around the globe who believe that hundreds of thousands of years ago, ancient gods, or Anunnaki, arrived on Earth from heaven. If this is true, they must have left the sign of their evidence behind us. The largest cluster of ancient ruins, including the oldest functioning megalithic sun calendar, Adam's calendar, is found in South Africa and Zimbabwe to date. Around 5 million circular stone structures have been identified in South Africa. Wow, that is way more than I thought. Wow. Okay. Author Zachariah Sitchin was the first person who highlighted the subject of Anunnaki. In 1976, Sitchin published his personal translations of the Sumerian texts in a series of books titled The Earth Chronicles. According to him, an extraterrestrial race known as Anunnaki arrived on Earth for gold from the mystical planet Nibiru, located beyond Neptune. If Sitchin is correct, then wouldn't there be evidence of their legacy on Earth? Well, the ruins of the ancient city discovered in Africa could be the missing link to the Anunnaki. A South Africa author and explorer, Michael Tellinger, and a small group of researchers found the ruins of a vast metropolis located around 150 kilometers west of the port of Maputo. According to initial surveys, these ancient ruins measure a staggering 1,500 square kilometers, with each wall only 3.5 meters tall. These structures are all connected to each other by channels of stone and held in a large mesh of agricultural terraces that cover entire mountains and resemble an infinite spider's web. Interestingly, there are no doors or entrances to the original structures, which indicate that originally they were not constructed as dwellings for people or animals. Additionally, the archaeology discovery of mysterious tools and artifacts in this place sign that its creator had advanced knowledge of somatics, study of wave phenomena, which is obviously sound waves, and used sound as a tool. Many people believe that this ancient metropolis could have been a part of some larger complex that encompasses an even greater area of 10,000 square kilometers. Besides the most intrigued information about its age, that is estimated to be between 160,000 and 200,000 years old, the geology of the site is also interesting. Situated between numerous gold mines, it has been suggested they were the first gold miners. Tellinger, author of Temples of the African Gods, Decoding the Ancient Ruins of Southern Africa, said, when Hein first introduced to me the ancient stone ruins of southern Africa, he had no idea of the incredible discoveries we would achieve in the following years. The photographs, artifacts, and evidence we accumulated point towards a lost civilization that has never before been and precedes all others. Not for 100 years or a few thousand years, but many thousands of years. He wrote in his book, an Ankh, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic, was discovered on one of the walls to the ancient southern African city. Are you wondering how on earth there could be a symbol of Egyptian god thousands of years before the Egyptian civilization emerged? He suggested that together with many ancient gold mines, all this activity was dated with various scientific techniques to well over 100,000 years. It also supports the theory of the presence of the Sumerian Anunnaki on Earth, mining gold in the Abzu, which was described as the Sumerian lower world located in southern Africa. Wow, that's interesting. I want to pause it right there and just say that I did not realize that Sumerian civilization was also in southern Africa. I mean, I've read, the Zachariah Sitchin's work and everything, but I didn't really realize that the Sumerian civilization was considered South African as well. So that's really interesting. But moving on, he claimed the southern African ruins are so vast and circular for the purpose of creating a massive amount of energy to locate and extract gold from the mines. He continues to explain in his recording. Well, what first caught my attention was the fact that the stones have been used to build these circular stone ruins, these ancient ruins. They ring like bells. Every stone, I suddenly realized that it wasn't just an accident because these stones were making a completely different sound and they rang. As I say, they actually rang like bells, the most beautiful crystal or metallic structures. The first advanced civilization emerged in the ancient city of Sumer, located in Mesopotamia around 6,000 years ago. Tullinger said that the archaeological findings in southern Africa suggest that the Sumerians inherited much of their knowledge from the unknown civilization that emerged thousands of years before them in southern Africa. In his book, The Cosmic Code, the sixth book of the Earth Chronicles, Sitchin wrote in detail the timeline of planet Earth. So that's a little backstory to get us started here. And, um, like I said, I'm probably going to go through about 5 different sites that I've chosen. But that one I feel is the most interesting to me and the one that would probably be the most credible in regards to a connection with ancient aliens. Because obviously, like it mentioned in the article I just read, it actually really goes along with the works of the Sumerians, their ancient tablets and their stories of these gods coming to Earth and mining gold, and then creating workers to mine gold. So I think that's really fascinating, and to me, that is actually very credible evidence, because obviously the early hominids that have been dug up are, said to be around 200,000 years old, which is like basically around that time period or older. But it's really weird because there obviously isn't much evidence of early hominids around that time being able to create giant structures, megalithic structures and civilizations like this. So that just goes to show that there's probably something to this, and that, is in connection with ancient aliens. And obviously, why would, a hunter gatherer, ancient humans that are, mostly just hunter gatherer species, why would they be mining gold or spending so much time and effort mining gold? So I think that's really fascinating. And I've actually seen Michael Tellinger in person talk about this, and his rocks that ring like bells and mud fossils, which is another interesting thing that you should definitely look into with his work. Highly recommend it. All right, so the next one here, and let me just go through your comments for a minute here. I just want to pull up a few of these comments here. So obviously Alexander says harmonics and frequencies. I think a common theme in a lot of these ancient sites, and some of these I'm going to talk about today, and most of all the ones in Peru, which there's certain places that I don't have prepared for tonight's show in Peru, such as Ollanta Tambo and Sacsayhuaman, which have sites that very clearly show that they have been built or used in a way to manipulate stone with sound, or that these sites were used for the use of sound or cymatics in some sort of way, manipulating energy with sound. So I think that is kind of a common theme with all this, which means, like, it brings up the question, does this mean that ancient humans knew how to work with sound or cymatics to create or manipulate stone and other things? Or was this an ancient alien technology, and ancient aliens came to the earth and built these structures with this sound technology that they knew and understood, and then left it here after they left for the humans to use? So that's something to think about. I mean, obviously, a lot of these structures that I'm going to be mentioning today were built before the time of the Great Flood. So maybe it was an ancient civilization knowledge that was lost when the Great Flood happened, which could be very likely. So, yeah. So basically, yeah. Let's move on to the next one here. So I just mentioned Peru, so let's go into the Nazca Lines. This is one that, a lot of people have probably heard of, but I want to get into this because it's very interesting. I mean, so these are the Nazca Lines, are these lines in the ground that are seen from space that depict all these ancient, different creatures, animals. And why would the people in Peru, the ancient people of Peru, or they say the Incan people, why would they spend so much time creating something that they themselves cannot see? I mean, what would be the point of that? So, really strange. I mean, it just, I mean, first of all, how would this even be possible? I mean, it would be very difficult to map out something to create on the earth that can be seen from space without, just being there in person. And like, it would be very difficult. I myself couldn't imagine how you would go about doing that without modern day technology. So let's get into this here. This is TRT World, an article by TRT World. What is the mystery behind the ancient Nazca Lines? The massive Nazca Lines were made by ancient people 2,000 years ago and continue to exist without any damages to date. No one has been able to fully explain the meaning of these lines. Imagine yourself soaring in the high desert skies of southern Peru on a plane. What you expect to see is probably the dull, pale sameness of the rocks and sands. But there is much more in the region than that. A 2,000-year-old mystery lies in the country's landscape with massive shapes called the Nazca Lines that come into view from the air. The lines were discovered in a region of Peru just over 200 miles southeast of Lima, close to the modern town of Nazca. In total, there are over 800 straight lines, 300 geometric figures, and 70 animal and plant designs, which are called biomorphs. Some of the straight lines go up to 30 miles, while the biomorphs vary from 50 to 1,200 feet in length, meaning as large as the Empire State Building. They are most famous for representing animals and plants like a spider, hummingbird, cactus plant, monkey, whale, llama, duck, flower, tree, lizard, and dog. But perhaps the most unusual one is the drawing of a humanoid figure named the astronaut, with its hands and some unidentifiable depictions. And that would be that right there. According to scientists, the lines were created by the Nazca people who flourished around AD 1 to 700. The Shaman and Paracas cultures who lived before the Nazca people may have also drawn some of the geoglyphs. Anthropologists believe that the ancient people designed the shapes by removing 12 to 15 inches of rock and digging deep to reveal the lighter colored sand below to make the figures visible in the region covered in a layer of iron oxide coated pebbles. Presumably, they started with small scale figures and then increased their dimensions. But what is the purpose of these lines? This question has been waiting to be answered for over 80 years. Then you might ask, if they've been around for so long, why have they only been studied for 80 years? Well, the lines were able to get widespread attention when pilots flew over them with their planes in the 1930s. Before that, no one could identify the shapes from ground level and know about this mystery. Why are the Nazca lines, or why are there Nazca lines? Anything to do with aliens? In the late 1930s, American historian Paul Cossack began to investigate the lines both from the ground, and the air. Based on the relative location of one of the lines to the sun around the winter solstice, he assumed that the geoglyphs had an astronomy-based purpose. For him, the 310 square miles high desert is the largest astronomy book in the world. Following Kossak in the 1940s, a German archaeologist, Maria Reich, who is known as the Lady of the Lines due to her 40 years of investigation, agreed that the lines had an astronomical and calendrical meaning. According to Reich, some animal geoglyphs were representing groups of stars in the sky. Another theory that stood out from the others and attracted great attention was a Swedish writer named Eric von Däniken, who claimed his book, called Chariots of the Gods, that these lines were a landing site for UFOs and the ancient people considered extraterrestrials as alien gods. By the way, Chariots of the Gods, that is another book that really turned me on to everything in the disclosure UFO community. So definitely check that out. Highly recommend if you haven't already. So moving on here, other alien-related theories suggest similar assumptions, saying that the shapes were made by aliens and were used to steer their spaceships and as landing pads. In the late 1960s, however, other researchers, including American astronomer Gerald Hawkins, studied the Nazca lines and opposed the astronomical and alien-related explanations. More recent investigations suggested a very important factor by analyzing the structure and ecology of the region that seems to be the closest to the purpose of the Nazca lines. Look at the large ecological system and what's around Nazca. Where were the Nazca people located? Said John Reinhardt, a National Geographic explorer in residence. He refers to the arid climate of the region that receives about 20 minutes of rain per year. While this arid climate explains how these shapes came to this period without any damage, it also reveals an important insight into the purpose of the Nazca Lines, the need for water. It's likely that most of these lines did not point at anything on the geographical or celestial horizon, but rather led to places where rituals were performed to obtain water and fertility of crops. So obviously, they're going to get into what they think they may have actually been used for. But to me, that doesn't really make much sense. And I'm sure you probably are thinking the same thing, especially when it comes to this little astronaut guy over here, or alien, whatever you want to call him. So this is interesting. I mean, what's crazy to me is that no one 80 years ago when these were found, no one even really knew that they existed before that. So you would think if this was something that an ancient civilization spent so much time working on, that their descendants would know about it. So really fascinating. And to me, it's like, why else would they make something like this? That obviously, to me, I think that this is a connection with ancient alien races, because I think that maybe these ancient people wanted the ancient alien gods to come back and created this. That's my personal feeling about this. Maybe also some ancient aliens came down and created these for a pinpoint for them to fly over. Who knows? So that is second on my list here. Now let's move on to the next one. Before that, I'm going to go through the comments here. Good to see everyone here tonight. Leak Project here says, what if they were made for travelers via plane or air, not necessarily aliens, etc., ancient civilization? I agree with that, definitely. But I also feel that, I don't know, my personal feeling on this is that I think that, these ancient, I kind of go in with the Anunnaki story going along with that, and also my personal belief that ancient civilizations were seeded by extraterrestrials throughout history. I feel that at one point these ET gods, quote unquote, left, and some of these ancient civilizations around the world wanted their help, or wanted their knowledge, or felt like they needed them to continue, and maybe created these to try to get them to come back. So that's what my personal theory is on it. But also, ancient civilizations, maybe there were ancient civilizations that kind of came before the early hominids. Who knows? Or just maybe there were a lot of advanced ancient civilizations that we have no evidence of in this time, or that we don't understand. That kind of the evidence of that may have been wiped out with a great flood, and obviously whatever we have left is the ancient stone megalithic structures that are still standing around the world. I think both are likely. So moving on here. My next one on the list is Balbek. So before I get into this, I just want to show what I'm talking about here. So this is the ancient megalithic stones that are under this structure in Balbek, or that have been found around and under this structure. So, this stone is a lot bigger than you're probably thinking just looking at it here. These are, I believe, the biggest megalithic stones that have been found around the world. And I mean, could you even fathom how it'd be possible for ancient people to cut this and drag it. I mean, our technology now definitely could not do that. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Definitely not something that our civilization today could do. So, I'm going to read this article here on this. And like I said, this article doesn't really get very deep into it, but I know a lot of people believe that these stones. So, okay, before I read this, obviously there's these over 800-ton stones that are under the structure of Baalbek that we know of today. These stones were supposedly, so obviously the Romans built over this structure and other ancient civilizations built over it, I believe, but these stones that were originally there were there much longer than the Roman part of the structure. So a lot of people believe that because this was this large flat part of this temple or whatever you want to call it, a lot of people believe that it was an ancient spaceport. um I mean, why else would they make this huge, humongous platform out of these 800-ton stones? I mean, what do you think? Comment it below. I'm going to get into this article here on Balbek, but I just wanted to share with you all first what I thought of it. Um, so this article says the technology used to lift the over 800-ton stone blocks used to construct the ancient Balbek Temple remains unexplained. Whilst it's possible to trace Baalbek's history to around 8000 BC and into the Phoenician period, it's also possible that the Baalbek is older than this. If we consider, in like I said, that's crazy right there. So I just mentioned that it's traced back to 8000 BC. That is a long, a long time ago. Okay, a really long time ago. But it's possible, like I said, that the larger stones that are at the base, a lot of people have said that these could be traced to be way older than that. Way older than 8000 BC. I mean, who is cutting these giant ancient, these giant stones, some massive megalithic stones in 8000 BC or earlier? Definitely not Neanderthals. That's all I have to say. So while it is possible to trace Baalbek's history to about 8000 BC and into the Phoenician period, it is also possible that the Baalbek is older than this. If we consider the technology that would have been required to lift the large stone blocks used to build the earliest part of Baalbek, we are faced with a conundrum because the technology required to lift the massive stones used at Baalbek supposedly did not exist. History of Baalbek. It's generally accepted that the stone ruins of Balbek date back to the Canaanite period and was probably a site for the veneration of the Canaanite supreme god Baal, as its name would suggest. Subsequent periods of Greek, Roman, and Islamic occupation of Baalbek occurred until the area fell within the control of the Ottoman Empire during the 16th century, whereafter it became part of the modern Lebanese Republic. The Canaanites, Greeks, and Romans made extensive use of the site, with the Greeks and Romans building their own stone temples in honor of the gods Zeus and Jupiter. In renaming the site Heliopolis, the Greeks recognized it as one of the main centers of worship. In addition to the construction carried out by the Greeks and Romans, signs of which are still evident from the site as part of the ancient Baalbek ruins, the earlier Baalbek temple platform, which served as the foundation on which the later temples were constructed, has not been adequately explained. This older part of Baalbek was constructed using giant stones weighing at least 800 tons each. In addition, abandoned massive stones have also been discovered near the Baalbek site. How these huge stone blocks were cut and moved to the main Balbek temple site with the technology available at the time is also not fully accounted for. Alternative explanations for Balbek stones. Sitchin and Hancock propose that the stones at Balbek suggest that Balbek is much older than is generally accepted. According to Hancock, the key to the Balbek puzzle lies in appreciating that the construction engineering challenges posed by the stones used to construct Balbek suggest that it could not have been accomplished by the Canaanites, Romans, and or Greeks. An earlier, more advanced lost civilization with the necessary technology to move the Baalbek stones was therefore probably responsible for Baalbek, although Hancock doesn't go as far as identifying it. Sitchin, on the other hand, points to the ancient Sumerian record, in particular the Epic of Gilgamesh, in which Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, embarked on a quest for the immortality that took him to Baalbek so that he could board a Shem or rocket to the planet Nibiru, home of the Anunnaki gods, so that he could also obtain eternal life of the gods. And, so that right there, let me just pause right there before moving on. That right there just tells you, like, basically that the ancient Sumerians said in their epic, obviously the Sumerian civilization was what, from like 3000, 5000 BC, and they said in their ancient story, which is the most ancient story that we know of on the planet to date, which is the Epic of Gilgamesh, that the Gilgamesh king of Uruk went on a quest to Baalbek to board a rocket or a Shem to the planet Nibiru. I mean, they straight up just said that in the Epic of Gilgamesh. That's what it says. So why would people think that that's not what it's used for? I mean, the ancient people are saying that that's what it was used for. So I'm just saying, the ancient people very clearly state what it was used for. So I'm just going to leave that there. According to Sitchin, Gilgamesh witnessed rockets being launched from Baalbek to the Epic of Gilgamesh, and for this reason, Sitchin argues that Baalbek was actually an Anunnaki alien spaceport. This would explain the use of the massive platform stones and also resolve the question of the source of the technology required to move the giant stones used to build Baalbek. So, pretty crazy stuff. I think, right there, that is definitely one. It's like, how can you deny that? If the ancient people are saying in their stories that it was used as an ancient spaceport, it was an ancient spaceport. Okay? All right, so what do I have next on the list? So that was number 3. I think I'm going to do 2 more here. Okay, I wanted to share one here of India. I wanted to share something of India, and it was hard to pick because there is so many sites in India that were pretty obviously probably built by ancient aliens or ancient alien technology. I mean, or hey, maybe very, very advanced ancient civilizations. But, I had to really figure out which one to choose because there's so many, and a lot of them obviously, which I'm not going to show here, but a lot of the temples in India are shaped to look like Vimanas, which were obviously from the Epic of the Ramayana, and ancient Indian civilization says that Vimanas were used as they're basically like flying ships or flying houses or rockets, something like that. So all the ancient sites in India, a lot of the temples there were made to look like this, but there are many temples in India, many ancient sites. There's even, this is something I kind of wanted to put in here, but it doesn't really have to do with ETs. I don't think necessarily, but it's also really fascinating is the proof of ancient bomb shelters that are older than 3,000 years old that are in India. So that's pretty crazy. And obviously, we have the ancient myths of the Anunnaki and an ancient nuclear war that happened in India or somewhere in the Middle East around India and somewhere between like India and Egypt and that whole area of the world. So really fascinating stuff, and there's lots of evidence of that. And I'm not going to get into that anymore in tonight's show. Just look into that on your own. I might do another show on that in the future. But so what I chose for India to go over in tonight's show is the Kailasa Temple of Ellora. So this is from India.com. Why is it said that the spectacular Kailasa Temple of Ellora is a work of aliens? Hold your breath as you read this piece, for it will completely shatter what the history taught you about the Kailasa Temple of Ellora caves. Archaeologists claim that only one single rock was carved out extensively to construct the mammoth state-of-the-art structure. So here's a picture of that right now, and like I just said, this was all carved out of a single stone. What is odd about the Kailasa Temple is that it was built in flat 18 years in around 756 to 774 CE, which ideally should have been taken centuries to build, given the lack of technological prowess back then. So that wait, there should be more here. Okay, here we go. This temple has truly stood a test of time through invasions and wars. You can also spot this temple from a plane, and it is the only structure seen from the whole of Ellora. Many rulers tried to deconstruct this temple, but could not do so. Emperor Aurangzeb wanted to eradicate the very existence of the structure, and so had assigned the work to over 1,000 men. They worked day and night for over 3 years, but could not bring this temple down, except for disfiguring some figurines. This phenomenon can be compared to the pyramids. Another Muslim emperor wanted to deconstruct the pyramids, but was unsuccessful. Now, that is a little bizarre, don't you think? It's reported that over 4,000 tons of rock were scooped out of a rock to carve this temple out, which sounds completely impossible, even if there were thousands of artisans employed day and night for 18 years. Also, one cannot ignore the number of invasions and warlike situations being prevalent in the society during that time. Despite being such a huge and important structure, there is no historical record of this building. Kailasa Temple is complete with secret passageways, state-of-the-art drainage system, connecting bridges, and complicated designs all carved out of a single rock. Moreover, only this temple is visible from a helicopter among all other caves of Ellora. You will also see a clear X marked on this structure if you see an aerial shot of Kailasa Temple. So next time you visit Ellora, make sure you spend a lot of time here and look for clues. You won't be disappointed. Okay. So, obviously, that is just really fascinating that this could possibly be carved out of a single rock. And, like I said, there are so many sites in India. I want to go explore that myself. I know a lot of people have said that India is a hard place to travel, from what I've heard from a lot of people. So, but that's definitely something I want to go explore myself. I know there's just so many sites there that are just unbelievable that you can't even I could do a whole show on that and probably not cover them all. So yeah, I definitely want to do that someday. And I think that would be really fascinating. So let me move on. I think I have one more here before I end tonight's show. Okay, so we're going to end tonight's show with going off planet to Mars because I said all the places in the world. I didn't just mean Earth, I meant all over the world, ancient alien sites. So now we're going to get into the Cydonia region of Mars, which NASA has released many photos of, and people over the years have found many different sites in this region that they feel were either ancient pyramids or faces on Mars. There have been a lot of things uncovered in these photos. So I'll read this little part here. Viking spacecraft, first space probe to survive landing on the surface of the planet Mars, launched by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Viking was the most extensive and complex mission ever to explore Mars and included several experiments designed to test life on Mars. The Viking mission used two identical spacecraft to orbit and land on Mars. NASA launched Viking 1 on April 20th, 1975, and Viking 2 on September 9th, 1975. Each Viking spacecraft consisted of an orbiter carrying a variety of imaging and remote sensing instruments to study Mars from orbit, and a lander designed to operate on the intensively study the planet's surface. It took each spacecraft almost a year to reach Mars. Viking 1 went into orbit around Mars on June 19th, 1975, and Viking 2 on August 7th, 1976. Viking 1 landed on Mars on July 20th, 1976, on the western slope of Chryse Planitia. Viking 2 set down September 3rd, 1976, at Utopia Planitia, 6,460 kilometers from Viking 1. The Viking spacecraft continued to function long past their planned 90-day mission. The Viking 2 orbiter ran out of fuel for its attitude control system, the system that keeps the craft's solar panels pointed at the sun, and shut down on July 25th, 1978. Viking's controllers on the Earth were able to keep the Viking 1 orbiter functioning until August 7th, 1980. The last data from the Viking 2 lander were received on Earth on April 11th, 1980, and the Viking 1 lander made its final transmission on November 11th, 1982. And so I'm not going to read all of these, but I'm just going to go through what they looked like. So this is what they say is the face on Mars. And they say that the sacred geometry of the face makes it pretty likely that it was made by an intelligent being and not just some sort of accident that it is there. Um, So and apparently it relates to the Sphinx and the face of the Sphinx. A lot of people have made that connection. The same sacred geometry in the face of this is identical to the one on the Sphinx. And who knows? Like maybe this is actually there's a lot more underground here that is covered up. It's my understanding, and a lot of people have this understanding, and this has been said many times, by a lot of whistleblowers, different people, that Mars was hit by a cataclysm in ancient times, and that there used to be a civilization on Mars, and or that the civilization on Mars had like an ancient nuclear war and came here. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'm just going through this here, but here's another look at what the face looks like rotated around. This is another look at it from above. And so here's some different places in the region of Cydonia that people say are either ancient structures or ancient city squares. Here's an area they say is an ancient city square. Here's a pyramid. A lot of people say this is a pyramid. It looks very much like a pyramid to me. Definitely, with the different sides on it. So, pretty interesting. It in some ways it doesn't look like much, but if you think, okay, maybe there was an ancient civilization, or ancient race that was here, millions of years ago, or maybe hundreds of thousands of years ago, and it was hit by an ancient cataclysm or a nuclear war happened. Imagine what the surface would look like. I mean, that's that this like little piece right here is a lot bigger than what you think it is. So, it's pretty interesting what they have mapped out here. And if you would like to get more into this, definitely just look up the Cydonia region of Mars. I'm just giving you some visuals here, and feel free to go on with that. I think it's another picture of what these pyramids looked like. There's the face, there's the pyramid. Here's some circular looking structures. And here's another view of the pyramid here. So, like I said, if you want to look more into that, definitely go check that out. Look up the Cydonia region of Mars and get into that. So that's all I had to share for tonight's show. I have, there's so many different sites around the world. And like I said, I just kind of wanted to get into the ones that I felt aren't as much talked about. I could make this all on the pyramids or something like that. But, I just wanted to talk about the sites that I found very interesting. And this like barely covers it. That's just, barely getting into this. So there's really so much more with that. And I'd definitely like to maybe do a part 2 of this in a future show. I think that would be really interesting. So, and like I said, there's many places in America I think that have not really been uncovered yet. And that's something that is very interesting to me. So, thanks everyone for joining on tonight's show. Before I go, I want to remind you all to please check out my art over at shamanspears.com. I make uniquely handcrafted energy channeling devices for the purpose of channeling energy. They're all filled with copper coils, crystals, magnets, and sand I collect from sacred places around the world down the insides. They're all painted with crop circles that have been found around the world. And they definitely amplify energy. They're basically mixed between art and technology. And this is how I fund my show and keep myself going. So be much appreciated if you want to get a gift for yourself or for someone else. That is also a donation for me and my show. So would be much appreciated. And again, I do next day shipping on all orders. And that's all on shamanspears.com. Here's one of the spears that I'm keeping up here with me right now. Also, I have these organite daggers on the site. They're not actually they're shaped like daggers, but you can't actually cut with them. Just kind of cool. They have I believe moonstone and selenite in a lot of these that I have on the site right now. And I'm working on my next collection, so I'm really excited about that, and hopefully we'll get it out soon. So thanks everyone for being here with me tonight. Thanks for joining on tonight's show. And again, I usually go live every Wednesday, so please try to tune in on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, or also hit the notification bell because sometimes I go live on other times besides Wednesdays. So thanks everyone for joining me tonight, and until next time on Apollo's Odyssey, over and out.